Hey, everybody, it's Eddie from Tokyo. This is your cryptocurrency update from Japan. And if you are interested in or holding XRP, and especially are interested in ODL, you want to watch this video. Now, I know there's a lot of people following Ripple, and they're interested in the Volante partner because they announced some two big partnerships yesterday. First, American Trust and the Niche Global in Hong Kong. Now, the primary reason why they won over these businesses is because of their cloud native, cloud agnostic, 24/7 by 365 ISO 20022 support, replacing the legacy solutions. On June 15th, Deepak Gupta, he's the head of payments at Volante, he said that if someone were looking to make a mark in the payments industry today, what advice would we give him or her? Just 7 words: payments as a service in the cloud. So does this have anything to do with XRP and ODL? Well, I want to just point out what I learned. First, somebody sent me through a WhatsApp. He's a very skilled banking expert, and he brought to my attention that there are 3 alliances in this Fedwire business. That is for the US, Fiserv, FIS Global, and Jack Henry. And they're pretty much controlling and dominating the second tier and third tier of banking in the United States. And here is the double whammy, he writes. They own the client data, all the customers of the bank. And they get first right of refusal on all contracts as well. It's literally a legal oligopoly. An oligopoly is when a small group dominates a large group. So I want to know if this is going to really make a difference for ODL and XRP. You can see here, let me just take us back to where we were, if I can. And if I can, I am going to bring us to this article here that was written about how cloud-based core banking vendors look to smash this legacy oligopoly. Now, the oligopoly, they are processing deposits, they're processing loan payments, they're doing bank transactions, and that customer data. And it comes at a price, of course, it comes at a price. To send those Fed wires, the fees vary greatly, anywhere from $30 to $40 in fees. So those 3 big ones that were mentioned by the banking advisor are Jack Henry. They have 5,600 clients. FIS Global employs 55,000 people. They process 75 billion of transactions around the planet. And then there's Fiserv, who has 12,000 clients. Yeah, they are part of that legacy system that's being disrupted. Now, I know sometimes Ripple doesn't like to be called a disruptor because that means that you are not going with the flow. And I think they are trying to go with the flow in the banking world. But technology is technology. And this technology is making a huge difference. The Fed wires that are transferred, it's north of $2 to $3 trillion a day. The average value, approximately 5.4 million. So that's way above the low value payments that XRP ODL is focusing on. Even when you look at the median value, throw out the high, throw out the low, it is 19,900. And that figure was from a few years ago. 8% of those transfers are at more than 1 million US dollars. So the high value transfers, yeah, they're definitely not what Ripple is focusing on for XRP ODL. But I will say that for an IPO valuation, should Ripple really be assisting Volante with their technology in these newly acquired accounts? That has upside. And Marcus Treacher said Ripple volume is doubling every quarter. That should be understood that that's volume that is generally sent over the network. So you have that volume, and then you have the volume that equates to ODL using the digital asset XRP. Two different things entirely. I am really one to focus on ODL. Although I understand there is great advantage to growing the volume in general, because as I said in my tweets, that as volume over RippleNet doubles quarter on quarter and liquidity can be built out in a meaningful way, plus regulatory clarity arrives, much of that will translate to ODL volume, which impacts supply. And it's a vision still in the making, but I do believe visions can and do happen. Somebody asked me in the reply down here towards the bottom if I could elaborate on what impacts supply for the on-demand liquidity. I have many times talked about that impact. I'm going to include the two links to where David specifically talks about it. So I think who better to talk about it than David? And I will put his Quora answer to the question that he received if large amounts of banks were to adopt XRapid and start using XRP, how would that impact the token? His answer is excellent. And you want to look for the part where he talks about the piles of XRP. Keep that in mind. It doesn't matter who's holding these piles, okay? It can be banks, it can be money transmitters, it can be market makers. We don't care. So the fact that people say banks don't use XRP, actually, it doesn't matter as long as XRP is being used. The second oldie but goodie to refer to see how that impacts the supply is David being interviewed on Bitcoins and Gravy with the host, John Barrett. It's I think an hour-long conversation. If you don't have time to listen to the hour-long conversation in full, there is a transcript to everything that was said. This is an oldie but goldie, and it is a time, it's old enough that it is at a time where David was more apt to talk about the impact of price. So I am using David's words to know that there is going to be an impact on the supply when there are piles of those XRP being used to facilitate ODL all over the globe. So XRP isn't a security, declares former CFTC, the Commodity Futures Trading Commissioner. And this is really interesting because the second part of the tweet that I had is if we get also in combination with this real liquidity for the corridors plus the regulation clarity, this is going to be then the ability to actually realize the vision. And it is slowly building out. So he declares that XRP is not a security. It was just published this morning in the International Financial Law Review, and he's bolstering his arguments with the three-pronged definition Howey test that is used by the SEC. And whereas Brianne Madigan just said in yesterday's podcast, she is the Ripple head of global institutional markets, and David interviewed her on the Block Stars, and they're talking about regulations. I want you to listen to this portion because you're going to see where we're at. Okay, here we go.
It's interesting that you use the expression regulatory uncertainty and not just, let's say, regulation. Is the problem more that we don't know how the regulations apply to these novel applications? Is that more the problem that there are bad regulations that we just can't figure out how to comply with them?
Yeah, it's another great question. I think it's twofold. I think, number one, a number of global jurisdictions have started in a positive way to take the lead around setting frameworks or guidelines, goalposts to operate within. And that's been extremely helpful. So I applaud those jurisdictions. However, there is no globally consistent approach to how to apply those regulations. And until we have number one, more clarity, and number two, more consistency, we will continue to be confused as an industry. We need clarity from regulators. We need a consistent approach across the globe so that we don't run into a scenario where this incredible innovation that's being driven from a number of different parts of the world has certain jurisdictions that are driving out innovation. For example, if the US isn't fast enough to develop constructive policy, you may see people who are strong innovators and leaders in this space decide to leave and set up their businesses in other jurisdictions that have been faster at setting up reasonable frameworks to operate in. So I think it's both. We need clear regulation that companies know how to interpret and understand that they can operate within, and then we need global consistency as well.
So there you have it. Regulation, twofold. We need adoption for the global framework guidelines, so those kind of basic standards, with a second consistent approach. And then we'll continue forward using the digital asset. I think it's happening, but it's happening, I think, far slower than most people thought it would. There are countries, especially in Southeast Asia, where the clarity has been stronger. But the United States is still, in my opinion, way, way behind. So let's go kind of back to this cloud, the importance of the cloud. There's a new PDF that came out yesterday, and this talks about the new Ripple cloud. It brings people to market 5 days faster. It is lowering the total cost to be part of the network, and there's no need for hardware requisition, and there's no need to staff up to get started. And it's done with just one API. Spot on Money, the new finding as a user, is owned by Monex. They are foreign exchange specialists. Then you have Orbit Remit. I asked them yesterday in a live chat if they were using XRP ODL. They told me no. But you have BC Remit here from the Philippines, and I engaged with them on their chat, and just within the hour, actually, I received a confirmation that they are indeed in the early stages of ODL adoption. So they are going to be part of those piles of XRP that are needed around the globe to facilitate the on-demand liquidity and also to get this vision done. So I think it's very, very promising to know that in areas of the world where the clarity is clear, then it is very easy to use XRP. So cloud, wow. All right, this takes me into an article that was written on Asia Crypto. And you can see that they title this China's BSN versus RippleNet Cloud, that there is a blockchain cloud war. And it reveals that the blockchain cloud war is really, it's really a real war. Remember that there's a Brazilian bank, the first financial institution to join the Ripple Cloud, really made big waves. That's why this article was written. And you see, China just launched the world's biggest blockchain ecosystem, and it's promising to unleash a wave of distributed ledger technology innovation. This is why I keep saying I don't think the United States is keeping up. And the network, which is called the Blockchain Services Network, BSN, is an immense digital infrastructure to serve as the backbone for interconnectivity in China and abroad. The former head of IBM's FinTech Innovation Lab in Singapore, Rich Tudun, says, and I want to just read this, what he says here, since they have turned it on, it has become by default the world's largest blockchain network overnight. And it will probably lead to the single largest change in how we compute since going onto the cloud. This is being built by banks. It was a consortium of the biggest banks in China that built this. And important to know, it's interoperable. So it's going to be used domestically and abroad as well. So when I tweeted that China has gone all in, that the world's biggest blockchain cloud ecosystem, BSN, has unleashed this wave of innovation using the distributed ledger technology, financed and built by the consortium of the biggest banks. I included, I think the first time ever I've done it, I included President Trump to please get his people talking to Ripple ASAP. Now, some of you tweeted back in a reply to me that Mnuchin is already taking care of this. And why didn't I just tweet to him? Well, first, Mnuchin is really not on Twitter like President Trump is. President Trump is on Twitter all the time. And I think Mnuchin has his hands full right now. Secondly, Trump is very sensitive to China. So I was hoping this would get his attention. And some of you also replied that, yeah, Mnuchin is already taking care of this. Are you kidding me? That is just so far from the truth. Doing just the digital dollar is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about creating a cloud-based interoperable banking system. In March, if you remember, he told Americans that the stimulus would be direct deposited into our accounts in 3 weeks, and that there would also be a web-based application to give direct deposit information on. Well, neither of that happened. I received a paper check here from the US. How crazy is that? My address was even wrong, but it still made it. I just can't believe that it actually made it. A single piece of paper during a time where I can't even still send a package to the US due to the disruption of flights for my tiny little export business that I've had for 20 years. It's been dead in the water for a couple of months. And now the checks that are mailed out, well, it's just archaic. And if I go to the IRS Get My Payment website, they're now moving to mailing out debit cards. You gotta be kidding me. Do you know the first debit card was created in 1966 in Kansas? This is not the kind of technology that I'm talking about. So, well, yeah, I think I'm going to jump to the fluff because I don't want to turn this into a big rant. But I'm not one of those who thinks that the United States is on top of it. I might be sounding harsh on them, and I think my harsh criticism is justified. And no, I don't think that there is something that's going to go on overnight. Now, I know that a lot of this is kicking them in the butt to move faster, but personally, I think they have been asleep at the wheel while China has not. All right, so I want to get into the fluff and just give a shout out to Brianne Madigan again. So even Japan can pass a new consistent standard, and they have done so for toilets. Now you might laugh, but I'm not joking here. I'm not making light of it either. This is really important for you, especially those of you who come and visit Japan. On June 17th, Japan Sanitary Equipment Association has agreed to unify the icons that are used on the control panels for the Japanese toilets, which not only are extremely difficult to use if you can't read Japanese characters, but it's even baffling for Japanese. So they want to standardize the complex controls. And in doing so, this is going to be wonderful for the Japanese, for the foreign tourists who come to Japan. Well, for anybody who uses a toilet in Japan. So toilets come with a remote control. This is one example of that. And they also come sometimes with a side-mounted control. And most often, actually, like the one I have, is a control that is mounted on the wall. You'll find these in the public restrooms, the hotels, and the restaurants. And you can see there's a lot going on here. You can set the temperature of the seat. You can set the temperature of the water bidet. You can control the sound level of the music that's played to cover any sounds that you may have that you don't want other people to hear. It also has the strength of the washlet spray, the strength of the flush, the strength of the air dry. It's complicated. And so the fact that they are going to standardize the icons, it will be much easier to use these toilets. Toilets are like new car models in the West. This is a different style that is just getting popular, and it's a wall mount. It's called the IKEA, the IKEA. But the king of toilets is the Neo Rest. This Neo Rest has all those functions that I showed you on the remote control, but it also has what's called a new tornado flush. It's the strongest flush, and they actually studied cyclones to develop it. It actually will flush the entire bowl surface for cleaning. And it also has an Actylite. It's a germicide weapon to fight viruses and bacteria. So it's not done with a chemical, but done with an ultraviolet light technology on the inside. So after you flush, there is the use of this light with also a mist of electrolyzed water that sprays to further fight any living microorganisms. This toilet in Japan runs about $7,000 US. And if it's imported to or exported, I should say, to the United States, I think it runs around 11,000. It's very expensive, but boy, I'll tell you, once you have a toilet from Japan, you can just never go back. And my last little shout out is yesterday in my video, I wore some sunflower earrings, and today I have a white version by the same jewelry creator. So how cool is this? All right. I used my XRP earned on my coil site to purchase 3 pairs of earrings from a mummy blogger and jewelry creator in the UK who accepts XRP as a payment. Now that's a real use case 3 times over. So thank you so much, Andrea. I just love them. And the fact that people made comments yesterday, I think they're a real hit. So I want anyone who wants to do the same, go ahead and follow Mama Shine on Twitter. Yeah, XRP is not a security. It's a tool to transfer value. All right, everybody, do take care. Sayonara for now. Bye-bye.